What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, and in this video I'm going to be going through the Week 8 injury report heading into the Sunday and Monday slate of games. So going through the players who are questionable, doubtful, and then the guys who have already been ruled out. If you guys have any fantasy questions, drop those down below. I'll be getting back to every single person. And then if you guys do enjoy the video, find it helpful, just do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And actually, before I jump into the players who do have injury designations, I do just want to point out two players who are actually going to be good to go this week. First and most importantly, DeAndre Swift. He is off the injury report. This is great news for him moving forward. And I think this is pretty solid news for him this week, because if he was heading into Sunday as a game time decision, still on the injury report, we got to feel at least a little skeptical starting him, because we saw in week 3 he played limited and it wasn't a great fantasy performance. Not saying he's going to have that full workload he had in week 1 and week 2, but I think this is a step in the right direction. I believe I ranked him this week as like a mid-tier running back 2. I'm willing to bump him up to more of a high-end running back 2, potentially even a top 12 option. So I think if you're a Swift owner, you have to feel good with that news. And then the second player, Russell Wilson, obviously a big name. To be honest, I don't think this has a huge swing in terms of fantasy football. I think this probably gives Sutton a little bump up, maybe Judy a little downgrade. But yeah, so those are two players who are good to go. Now moving over to the players who are questionable this week, starting it off with Dalton Schultz. Just cannot shake this knee injury. I think when he's fully healthy, he's going to be a really strong mid-tier tight end 1. I think while he's still battling through this, he's probably more of a back-end tight end 1, but still someone that I would be starting this week. Next up, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I have no idea what's going on here with this situation. As I'm guessing you guys probably know, Amon-Ra left the Week 7 game with a concussion, or was in concussion protocol, whatever. Head injury, he's out of the game. Then we hear after, I think it was like Monday or Tuesday, that he doesn't have a concussion. He did not have a concussion. It was just precautionary during the game. And now he's on the injury report, questionable for a concussion. So I don't know if any of you guys have some like inside information here. I'm pretty sure all of what I said is true. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't know what's going on here. For fantasy-wise, if Amon-Ra's active, I'm playing him. If he's out, obviously we pivot. Josh Reynolds would probably be the next best option there. Then we have some Raiders weapons questionable for their game. Devontae Adams with an illness, Darren Waller with a hamstring. These are players that I'm still comfortable playing, even if their game time decisions a little banged up. Obviously, Devontae Adams, you feel a lot more confident in than Darren Waller. But still for Waller, like I'm taking 80-90% of Darren Waller over the majority of fantasy football tight ends. Then we have the Saints tight ends, Juwan Johnson and Adam Troutman. Juwan Johnson dealing with a hamstring, Adam Troutman with an ankle. Now, typically, these guys aren't super fantasy relevant, but last week with Adam Troutman out, we saw Juwan Johnson have a pretty solid game. He caught 2 touchdowns, and I will get into it later on, but they're having issues at the wide receiver position once again. So if Troutman is out and Johnson plays, I think he could be a potential like tight end play if you're desperate. Have a guy on bye, maybe you're in a 14, 16 team league. So just something to keep in mind there. Then we have Ryan Tannehill with an ankle and illness. Honestly, I feel like Tannehill starting, Malik Willis starting. Like, I don't know if this affects anyone fantasy-wise. You're obviously starting Derrick Henry no matter what. You're not starting Tannehill in a one-quarterback league. You're probably not starting any of those pass catchers. At least I hope you're not starting any of those pass catchers. So obviously, it's something to talk about. But fantasy-wise, don't think it has a massive impact. Moving over to the Texans wide receivers, we have Brandon Cooks dealing with a wrist injury, Nico Collins with a groin. Now, I know there are a lot of Nico Collins fans out there. Personally, I'm not overly high on him, so even if Brandon Cooks missed this game, he's still not someone I would be throwing into my lineup. Some of you guys probably will disagree with that, and that's okay. For Brandon Cooks, if he plays, I think you're going to continue to fire him up as like a potential flex option. At this point in the season, he's definitely not someone who needs to be in your lineup, but I do think he's a decent play this week. Nico Collins, I'm not playing him either way. We have Logan Thomas, who has missed the last few games with an injury. He's dealing with that calf. He's not someone who I want to be starting in my lineup, but I do think he's someone to point out. He's been a startable tight end option the last few years, so just someone to kind of give a shout to. Then we have the Seahawks wide receivers, Tyler Lockett dealing with both hamstring and rib injuries. DK Metcalf with that knee. Honestly, for DK Metcalf, this has to be great news. It sounds like they're both going to be game time decisions. Obviously, it's not great that he's injured, but you see him go down, get carted off the field. You're probably thinking serious knee injury, if not some sort of sprain where he's out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. For him to be a game time decision, just 1 week later, I feel like you got to be feeling pretty good about that, after seeing him get carted off. I think these guys are both strong enough options where if they're playing, I'm willing to start them. I'm willing to take the risk of them being slightly banged up or limited heading into this game. Christian Watson for the Packers, questionable with a hamstring. Now, he's not someone I want to be playing, but he's someone I think we need to keep our eyes on because I'll get into it in a little bit, but we have Lazard out. We have Romeo Doubs, who has not exactly lived up to expectation, potentially had Rodgers throwing some shade towards him. Not sure if that quote was directed at him, but he was basically saying, like, the guys who are playing a ton and not getting it done, they probably need to be replaced. A lot of people thought that was talking about Romeo Doubs, so I don't think Christian Watson is going to be startable this week, but we'll kind of see if we get a shakeup in the route participation. I think at this point, we've seen Doubs. He hasn't really made the most of it. If we can get Christian Watson getting those snaps, then maybe he becomes interesting. And then the final player who's questionable, Hayden Hurst. We don't exactly have the official injury designations for the Bengals-Browns game because they play on Monday, but I believe he's been a limited participant this week with a groin and ankle injury, so just something to keep an eye on there. And then we have one player who's doubtful, that is Ezekiel Elliott. Basically, doubtful means they're not going to play. I feel like that's, a common trend here. So if Zeke is out, I think Tony Pollard becomes probably a top 12 running back this week, someone who should be a lock in your lineup unless you somehow just have like a wildly stacked running back room. I guess it's possible you're in a position where you have like an elite running back and then maybe you hit on ETN and Walker, and so you're sitting there with Pollard as your number 4. I still think he's in that range with Walker and ETN, but that's just a spot where you can't really pick a wrong guy there. Moving over to the players who have already been ruled out, we have Chuba Hubbard out with that ankle. I think this makes this backfield a lot easier to play. I feel a lot more comfortable starting Deonta Foreman with Hubbard out than I would have if he was active, in some sort of gross split. James Conner continues to miss time with that rib injury. I was very in on Conner coming into the season. I think he's one of my most owned players on Underdog. Has not panned out. That you just can't stay healthy. He'll get in there, then he'll leave with injury. Now he's missed, the last few weeks. For Eno Benjamin, I think this makes him a solid mid-tier running back too this week and someone you can rely on in your fantasy football lineups. Then I think I mentioned this earlier, Saints wide receivers, Michael Thomas out again with that toe injury, Jarvis Landry with the ankle. Continue to fire up Chris Olave as a very strong wide receiver too. Then for the Jets, we have Corey Davis out with a knee. Now, we're probably not comfortable starting any of these Jets wide receivers, but if there was a game for Garrett Wilson to kind of reignite what he had going on early on in the season, I think this could be the opportunity here. Corey Davis out. Elijah Moore, it looks like he's going to play, but are we seeing the same route participation Elijah Moore had early on where he just missed the last game, requested the trade? Things are up in the air here, so this could be the opportunity for Garrett Wilson to have a big game. Not someone I want to start, but just kind of hoping, for the sake of him as a prospect, a player, that he'll get an opportunity. And then we have Deebo Samuel, big time news here, out with a hamstring. I think this skyrockets Brandon Ayuk up to mid-tier wide receiver 2 territory, probably a top 20 option this week. Deebo out, Ayuk's going to be the number 1. So, if you have Ayuk, I think you definitely have to strongly consider playing him. I mean, he should be in your lineups at this point. Once again, unless you have, stacked options at that spot. Cam Akers, once again, missing time, non-injury related, just seems to be, done on the Rams here. So Darrell Henderson, I guess, is a solid flex play. You don't love it on this Rams offense, but he'll likely have a decent number of opportunities. Then we've got some Giants injuries. Daniel Bellinger out with that eye. Just a freak injury. Really unfortunate because he was establishing himself as the clear-cut tight end 1 for them, but he's going to be out. Kenny Galladay out with a knee. This is Wan'Dale Robinson's time. Kadarius Toney is gone. Wan'Dale is someone who I'm very high on rest of season. We have Allen Lazard out with a shoulder. I think I mentioned that earlier. He's someone who had established himself as a very startable option. If you have Aaron Rodgers in your lineup anywhere, please get him out of there if you can. This wide receiver room is trashed. He doesn't even have his number 1 wide receiver. Just not a pretty situation there for the Packers. Then we have Jamar Chase, who is out with that hip injury. I guess some slightly positive news after some really rough news is that they didn't put him on IR, which means they believe there's some chance he returns within that 4-week window. So slightly positive, I guess, but definitely a big hit. I think T. Higgins is a mid-tier wide receiver one, and I think Tyler Boyd's probably a top 24, top 20 option this week. And then David Njoku, very likely to miss this week with an ankle, not trying to play, any of their backup tight ends there. Just unfortunate for Njoku, who's having a really strong season. But that is going to wrap it up for the Week 8 injury report. As always, if you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, drop your questions down below. Good luck with your matchups this week, guys. Thank you for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.